Picture attacking another group of humans 1 million years ago. Whatever weapon you're carrying, a rock, a club, a sharpened stick, it only works if you get close enough to swing it, which means they can get just as close to you. Every fight is a fight either side could win, decided mostly by size, strength, and luck. Then, at some point, no one can pin down exactly. Someone changes the math. They take a sharpened stone point and bind it to the end of a wooden shaft. That single idea, a spear you can throw, not just jab with, is one of the most consequential inventions in the human story, and almost nobody talks about it. The oldest strong evidence for it comes from a site called Kathu Pan 1 in South Africa. In 2012, a team led by Jane Wilkins published findings in the journal Science, dating a layer of stone points there to roughly 500,000 years old, made not by our species, but by Homo heidelbergensis, a shared ancestor of both Neanderthals and modern humans. Proving those points were spear tips and not just sharp rocks took a strange kind of experiment. The researchers made exact replicas, fired them into springbok carcasses using a calibrated crossbow, and studied the fracture patterns left behind. Then they compared those patterns across the whole collection to the ancient points. The match was statistical, not a single smoking gun, but it held up. Not everyone agreed it held up well enough. In 2014, researchers Virla Rotz and Hugues Plisson published a direct challenge, arguing the fracture evidence wasn't specific enough to rule out other causes, like a point simply breaking underfoot. Wilkins and her team published a formal rebuttal. The argument over how confidently a 500,000-year-old rock can be called a weapon is still, in a sense, unresolved. While that debate continues, a second site in Germany shows the technology already working at scale. At Schoningen, archaeologists found wooden throwing spears so well preserved their finely shaped points survived intact. For decades, they were dated to around 300,000 years old. Then, in 2025, a new dating study using amino acid analysis on ancient snail shells revised that number down to about 200,000 years, moving the spears from the world of Homo heidelbergensis into the era of early Neanderthals. For years, some researchers assumed these spears were thrusting weapons only, too heavy and short-ranged to actually be thrown at anything. In 2019, a team tested that assumption directly. They had trained javelin athletes throw exact replicas. The spears reached release speeds over 60 feet per second and stayed effective out to 15 or 20 meters, a real throwing weapon, not just a close-range jab. A little further along, at a site called Leringen, also in Germany, excavators found a wooden throwing spear still lodged between the ribs of a straight-tusked elephant skeleton. A study confirmed the kill at roughly 125,000 years old, made by Neanderthals, complete with butchery marks showing they carried away thousands of pounds of meat and fat from the animal. By this point, the spear wasn't a new idea anymore. It was a refined, trusted tool. A tool for hunting elephants and horses, though.
The real question for a series about war is when this same technology first turned on other humans on purpose from a distance. One of the clearest answers comes from a burial site called Riparo Tagliente in northeastern Italy, dated between 17,000 and 15,500 years ago. Using high-resolution microscopy, researchers identified unhealed injuries on a skeleton's leg bones caused by at least 2 separate projectiles fired from 2 different directions. Not an accident, not a single blow. Someone was targeted from a distance by more than one attacker during a period when groups were resettling the Alps after the last ice age. That's several thousand years before the Nataruk site we covered in episode 1, pushing the evidence for deliberate, projectile-based violence between humans back even further into the past. And this is really the point of the whole technology. A club only works if you're standing close enough to be hit back. A thrown spear lets you do damage and create distance before anyone can retaliate. That single shift from mutual risk to one-sided risk may be one of the most underrated variables in the entire history of conflict. It has nothing to do with who's bigger. It has everything to do with who can hurt the other side without being touched in return. Distance kept expanding after that. The spear thrower, or atlatl, adds a rigid lever to the throwing arm, launching a lighter dart faster and farther than an arm alone ever could. For a long time, researchers assumed atlatls arrived in North America around 13,000 years ago, alongside the Clovis hunting culture, based on similar tools already documented in Europe. A 2026 study challenged that too, arguing no genuine Clovis-era atlatl has ever actually been found, and that the tool may not have reached North America until closer to 10,000 years ago, thousands of years later than the textbooks assumed. Notice the pattern repeating. Almost every date and every claim in this story has at some point been challenged, revised, or pushed back by new evidence. What's never seriously disputed is the direction all of it points. Spear tip, throwing spear, spear thrower, eventually the bow. Every step covers more distance than the one before it, and every step makes it a little safer to hurt someone without letting them hurt you back. That race for distance never really stopped. It's the same underlying logic behind the catapult, the long bow, the rifle, the artillery shell, and the drone hovering safely out of sight over a battlefield today. Different tools, wildly different eras, same original bet. Whoever can strike from further away wins more often and dies less doing it. So go back to that first person at Cathu Pan 1 500,000 years ago, binding a sharpened stone to a wooden shaft. They probably had no idea what they were really starting. They weren't just making a better hunting tool, they were rewriting the basic math of violence itself. A math every weapon since has just been solving a little further, one throw at a time.